Hello again. Welcome back to week 50 of year 5 of the Religious Education Initiative. This is day 3. We are continuing with the book of Acts. We're very close to finished here. So last time we saw St. Paul set out on his journey for Rome as a prisoner of the Romans, bound for the trial before Caesar, which was his right as a Roman citizen, in which he had demanded rather than go back into the power of the chief priests and rulers of the people in Judea. He warned the officer, the centurion in charge of the detachment of soldiers bringing him to Rome, that they should not set sail in the autumn, but rather should wait until the better weather of spring. But the officer and the captain of the ship disagreed, and took the chance of a favorable wind from the south to set sail from south of Crete for Rome. Actually, they were trying to get to a better harbor. I misread that the first time. But a strong storm blew up from the northeast and drove them far away from Crete, not just for 3 days, but for several days. Again, I misread it. And they began to throw everything off the ship, trying to save it and themselves. So we resume at this point our story. So this is verse 21 of chapter 27. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul then stood up among them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me, and not have set sail from Crete, and thereby avoided this damage and loss. I urge you now to keep up your courage, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For last night there stood by me an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I worship, and he said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before the emperor, and indeed God has granted safety to all those who are sailing with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. But we will have to run aground on some island.' When the 14th night had come, as we were drifting across the Sea of Adria about midnight, the sailors suspected that they were nearing land. So they took soundings and found 20 fathoms. A little farther on they took soundings again and found 15 fathoms. Fearing that we might run on the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. But when the sailors tried to escape from the ship and had lowered the boat into the sea on the pretext of putting out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, 'Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved.' Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the boat and set it adrift. Just before daybreak, Paul urged all of them to take some food, saying, 'Today is the 14th day that you have been in suspense and remaining without food, having eaten nothing. Therefore I urge you to take some food, for it will help you survive, for none of you will lose a hair from your heads.' After he had said this, he took bread, and giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. Then all of them were encouraged and took food for themselves. We were in all 276 prisoners in the ship. After they had satisfied their hunger, they lightened the ship by throwing the wheat into the sea." All right. So I'm going to say I made a lot of mistakes on my first time reading this, and it's worth noting. There's a value to reading these things aloud because you miss things when you're skimming them quickly or even reading them carefully. Details like how many days were they actually traveling. So we had gotten days, how long they were being driven. Last time we heard that they had started to lighten the ship. The third day I think they threw out the ship's tackle, and they had these anchors. The anchor was thrown out so that they were being driven, but being driven at least in the right direction, because if you throw an anchor from the stern, then at least the wind blows you forward and you can maintain some control and direction. Because a ship that gets sideways to the to the wind and the waves, well, that's a ship in danger of foundering, and that's probably why they're moving so slowly, because they've taken 14 days in this storm to travel 600 miles. So that for the first thing. Second, the Paul stands up and he. It's almost like the opposite of the story of Jonah, right? It's not Paul's fault that the storm has blown up. He warned them against this, but they didn't listen to him. So now he's promising them that they will, that God will preserve all of them, and I think he deserves this chance to say, "I told you so," and also it's important because he's urging them to listen to him now. To save their lives, and they seem to agree to do so. The centurion trusts him when he says, "Keep the sailors, don't let the sailors run away," and then they eat this meal. Now it's an interesting question. Usually, when we see it spoken of that Paul or any apostle, takes bread and gives thanks, the word for this is still, Eucharistis, Eucharistise. He gave thanks. He did the Eucharist. So whether he is actually doing the Eucharist here, I think that in context with the storm going, it may be that he's simply blessing, giving thanks to God for the food, breaking the bread and eating it. But he may be actually celebrating the liturgy for himself and the faithful with him. He may be celebrating the Eucharist, and it's worth noting that he began to eat. All of them were encouraged, and they took food for themselves. So he's eating in the Christian manner, and they're eating in their manner. But it's not clear to me what exactly is happening. So it's an interesting question. With that, I think we will note the promise. He says, take some food, it will help you survive. None of you will lose a hair from your heads. God's promise through his apostle that all will be well. So with that, God bless you all. We'll see you next week.